you're the lucky guy that gets to work on a vehicle after a garbage mechanic previously worked on it and way over torqued the lug nuts, there's a good chance when you go to remove these, you're going to get some of these lug nuts that get rounded off like this one did here. Now, I know it's very easy to think if this happens to you, let's just go take it somewhere. I can't do this. That's not necessarily true. You can do this yourself at home. Is it easy? No, but it's very doable. So let me show you the couple options that you have in order to get a stuck lug nut off of a wheel. So here's an example of one of the lug nuts I did get removed off that tire, and I'll remove that last one here by cutting it out. But I'm going to start from the least and easiest option, then we'll get into the more drastic options back there and how you can cut them out. But if you have this problem, I would start with first whatever socket you have. So let's just say we put a 21 mil on there and that's a little bit rounded off and it's sloppy like that. Try different sizes. And if you're not familiar, there's 12 points, there's 6-point sockets. Try other sockets and see if you can get a tight fit around there. So in that example right there, it's pretty tight where it's not going to slide on there. But what you can do is hammer this socket on there and that will grip that socket pretty well. And sometimes you can get lucky and those will come off. Just make sure you get it all the way hammered on there first before you start cranking on it. And a lot of times when you're doing that, I suggest trying it with a breaker bar. Sometimes you use the impacts and all it does is just round it off more. So that's the first thing I would try. If you have this problem, try other sockets that are smaller in there. If that doesn't work, then you're going to have to move on to using some of these bolt extractors. So what you can do on these bolt extractors is you, again, find the size that you need. And there's different versions. So I have an older Craftsman version here, and it's the flutes are kind of spiral on there. And sometimes those work, and other times they don't work as good. I have a Gearwrench version back here, and I'll give you close-up pictures of all these where it's straight in there and there's a lot more teeth. And a lot of times these work a lot better in removing those. So again, you're going to try that same process. You're going to find the size that's going to fit on your socket. And once you find the right size that's going to fit on there, then just take your hammer, and it's going to be tight like that. You don't want it to go on there very easily because it's not going to grip. So once you find that it's snug like that and you can't push it on there, hammer it down, and then again, try that and try to get it off. I would say probably of the 30 times I've had to do this in my life, probably a good 50 to 60% of the time, either the sockets or these bolt extractors, they typically work. And also, as I mentioned there before about these caps, just keep in mind if your cap is on there, you can always break those off if this is the part that's rounded. And as you can see here, here's one that I did break off on one of these other studs. Sometimes if you get that cap completely broke off, if that's rounded off, sometimes you get lucky and the nut behind there is not rounded off and you can get lucky to put a regular socket on there. Now, if you tried both of those options and it didn't work, your last option is you're going to cut it out. And there's a couple different options that you have here. The first thing I usually try when I have to cut it out is I'll try one of these multi-tools with one of these metal blades. Now, depending on the clearance you have on the hole where your lug nut goes, sometimes these larger sizes don't work. There's various other smaller ones, and these are going to be some of the ones I'm going to use on this vehicle here in a minute. But these will work better because they're a little bit smaller. The idea on this is you're going to try to go in here and you're going to try to cut this lug nut. And you're not going to get all the way down onto the lug nut because we're going to try to first preserve the stud so we don't have to replace the stud. In drastic cases, yes, you have to replace that, but we're first going to try to put a slice here on the lug nut, put a slice here on the other side. Then you can take a hammer and hammer against the side here, and a lot of times that lug nut will snap off there, then it's going to come off there and you didn't damage the stud. So we're going to try that here in a minute. If that doesn't work, then you got to go to plan D and you got to use a drill bit, and you're going to have to just drill out the center of that stud. And this is usually last option for me as far as, if I'm going to do this, because then you have the added cost and the added work to replace the stud. Sometimes the studs are easier than others where it's exposed and you can just hammer it out and hammer back in. Other times you got to take the entire wheel hub off, brake shields, etc. there. So it's not usually a fun process. So I usually save that for the last option. But between one of these options, you should be able to get this off. So let me try to cut one of these out here. Let me show you how you can do this. So here's the one that we're going to cut out. And as you can see there, it is rounded off pretty badly there. And it's not really in the best spot because anytime when you have these wheels that it conceals the lug nuts like this, these are always the harder ones. A lot of the trucks, a lot of your lugs are exposed where you can just get a grinder and you can get this done in literally a couple minutes. It's not that hard. But on these ones, you have to use some of these smaller blades like I just talked about. And we're going to try to cut it about right there and right there. And we're going to try to get some of that material pushed back so we can hammer the side of this off. And again, we're going to try to not damage that stud if we can. If we get to drastic measures where this doesn't work, you know, we'll just drill out that stud. So let's just try this blade here real quick. To get started here, we'll put a little thread cutter on the end of this, and we're going to do this throughout the process as well. And that will just help that blade cut a little bit easier, and we won't wear out the blade as quick. And also make sure you have it on a low speed. So on this Milwaukee M12 fuel, I have around usually 2 to 4 is what I use. And also make sure you're also wearing some safety glasses, because as you're chipping away at this, pieces can come flying out of there. Alright, so we got it cut down to the stud here, and I don't know if you can pick that up in the video or not, but we don't want to go much farther here on this initial pass because we don't want to tear up that stud. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a punch and we're going to hit at this top part up here, and we're going to just try to pry that out a little bit so it gets away from that stud. Then we'll start cutting a little bit more on the sides here. As you can see there, we're starting to open it up a little bit more. And again, just make sure you're not hammering on that stud in there on those threads. Just gently go through here and just start prying some of that back. Now that we have that pried up a little bit there, next thing we're going to do, we're going to take our multi-tool and I'm going to cut that piece off there. And I'm going to slowly try to see if I can get a little bit of another notch up here. Again, stay away from those studs. Alright, so there we got a couple of chunks to come out, and we're just going to keep continuing this same process until we get around there. It's very tedious, but eventually we will get this out of here. Alright, so after a couple of minutes of using our tools here, and I did switch it over to my little bit larger Bosch one, you can see that I do have that notch up in there, and it's about to break off. So what we're doing here is we're slicing that top portion all the way back to the wheel, trying to be careful not to get into the wheel or the stud. Once we get that piece cracked off, we might do a little bit more cutting on the sides, and we might not have to. We might just be able to take our punch, set it right here, should be able to just pound that down, and it would crack that smaller portion up top. So we'll see what happens here. Alright, so we got that piece broke off of there, and it does look like there's just a little bit more material. So I'm going to do another slice over here on this other side, then we're going to pound down on that bottom part. And as I'm hammering this, I don't know if you can pick that up, but it is chipping off all those pieces in the back there as well, all the way to the wheel. After cutting that for a few minutes, we got another big chunk coming out of here, and this just looks like the remaining of that cap. So just carefully remove that, and now we have the rest of that lug nut exposed in there, so we'll continue the process here. got the majority of that off, but it is still not budging off there. Sometimes you can drop the weight of the vehicle like I just showed you there, and sometimes that'll help crack it loose. Just make sure you put a couple other lug nuts on there loose so the wheel doesn't fall off. So we're going to try one other thing before we drill that stud out. We're going to take this hole saw, and it looks like it fits perfectly over those studs, and I'm just going to try to go in there and gently see if I can get a little bit more of that material out of there to see if we can break that loose. Alright, so by rocking the vehicle back and forth, we did get this broke loose, and as you can see in there, the wheel is not flushed up against that rotary anymore, so we did confirm that we were able to break it loose. So now we'll remove those other two loose lug nuts we put on there, then we should be able to take this off. Boy, it's not giving up without a fight, that's for sure. I'm going to try our hole saw here once. Just that there's a lip left on that lug nut that it's still getting hung up on, so we'll see if I can get it off with this. Alright, so we finally got this off, and as you can see here is our stud, and it looks exactly how we want, where the lug nut material is still on there. So we did confirm when we were down in there cutting, we did not damage the threads on this stud. So now we just need to knock off that material, then that stud should be good. To get this off, we're going to gently take a channel lock here, and we're going to try to just loosen this up, and it should crack off. Alright, so then there is the end result. Alright, so then the last test here, we'll just confirm that our new lug nut will go on there and it won't get hung up on those threads, and it looks like it goes on there perfectly fine. If yours doesn't go on that easy, you can always get a tap and die set, and most of these are an M12 1.5, or if you just get a complete set, you'll have all kinds of different sizes in there. But those will just thread right on there, and you'll be able to easily correct those if you did get into the studs. Here's an example of one that I had to cut the stud out in order to get this off. And I'll be honest, I've tried a lot of different ways over the years to drill these studs out, you know, cobalt bits, titanium, etc., all kinds of different ways. Yes, you can drill that out, but it's going to take you a lot longer. My favorite method over the years has been these die grinders. And I have a kit of these bits here, and I don't remember how much this cost. Maybe it was 20 bucks or so, but these have come in handy various times over the years. What I like to do is just use one of these bits here and just hold it centered there and just keep grinding it down until it grinds it out. I'll show you here in a minute on the wheel. We actually have the lug nut still stuck on the wheel. We'll flip it over and we'll pound it out. But to me, this is the easiest way to make sure you get these cut very quickly. I think I did this in maybe 15-20 minutes by using this. And also, don't forget, make sure you're using some cutting oil when you do this. It'll make your job a lot easier, and it'll prolong the life of that bit. But, you know, again, you can use any of these methods to drill these out. But if you have one of these die grinders, or if you don't have one, you might want to think about it. Again, you don't need something this heavy duty, but these work really well in getting those off. To install our new one, first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut this flush in here so those metal chunks don't come flying up at us when we're hitting it here with our hammer. And take our hammer and pound it out. Then take your new one. Then you can take a lug nut and tighten it on here. You can also sometimes hit in the back here to pound it in. There's just some of those threads on the end here. This is what you're trying to get. That just gets wedged in between this hub. Then as we ratchet this down, it'll thread that in there. Then when you get that to bottom out, then remove your lug nut. Then you're done installing the new stud. All right, so to wrap things up here, if you're struggling with this, again, this was my option 3 that I mentioned there before, where we were going to cut in here and we were going to try not to damage the studs because we didn't want to have to take off the rest of this in the back here with the wheel hub, etc., in order to get this stud out. With that said, on your vehicle, if your studs on the back are exposed, all you have to do is then just drill out this stud. Eventually it'll crack that loose. Then you just take a hammer and pound this stud out, pound a new stud in there, and you can almost do that a little bit quicker than the method here. I probably spent a good hour and a half getting this done. I could have probably done the stud method to drill that out maybe 30 minutes quicker, but then I would have to spend another hour getting everything, removed back here, go get a stud, etc., and put it in there. So, in the end, it was about the same time for me. But if you have access to that stud, you might want to think about that. So just try a couple of those methods that I talked about there earlier. And again, this was the drastic measures where you have to cut it. You will have to do this on occasion, but I think between the 4 options that I gave you earlier in the video, I think you have a couple good options there in order to get this off. In the end, just don't give up, and I promise you'll get it off just like we did here today. So hopefully this helped you out. If it did, please give me the thumbs up. If you're interested in more content like this, please hit that subscribe. But again, I hope this helped you out, and thanks for watching.